The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The Death Star 2 is burning. Not from outside, not yet. From within. The Emperor's throne room sits at the station's apex, a cathedral of black iron and contempt, and the lightning that fills it is Palpatine's laughter made visible. It cracks against the walls. It finds the metal and turns it white. It finds the boy and turns him into something else entirely. Luke Skywalker is on his knees. He has been on his knees for a long time. Long enough that the stone beneath him is wet. Long enough that his hands, both of them, the flesh one and the mechanical one, have stopped trying to rise. The lightning comes in waves, and each wave is a conversation Palpatine is having with himself, a proof he is demonstrating, a theorem about the nature of hope. This is what hope looks like. This is what it becomes. Vader stands at the edge of it and does not move. He has been standing at the edge of it for longer than he will admit to himself later. Or maybe there is no later. Maybe this is simply the shape of who he is, a man who watches and does not move. Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, who stood at the edge of everything for 23 years and called it loyalty. Luke looks up at him. Through the lightning, through the damage that is rewriting what his body can do, through everything, he looks up at his father. He doesn't say, "Help me." His eyes do. They always could. Even on Bespin, even with a severed wrist and a revelation that should have destroyed something fundamental in him, he looked at the man behind the mask with something that wasn't accusation. Anakin Skywalker spent 23 years telling himself that no one looked at him like that anymore. He was right. No one did. Only Luke. Father, Vader moves. It is not heroic. It is not graceful. He crosses the distance between himself and Palpatine in 4 steps, and on the 5th he takes the Emperor by the arms, those ancient, terrible arms, and he lifts. The lightning redirects instantly. It knows its new target. It finds the suit, finds every gap and seam and compromised joint, and it pours itself in. It is not like being burned. Fire has a direction. Fire wants something from you. Your surface, your edges. This is different. This enters. This finds the architecture of the suit and takes it apart piece by piece, circuit by circuit, and underneath the suit there is a man who was already mostly ruin, and the lightning does not care. The lightning simply continues. He gets Palpatine to the shaft. He throws him. He watches him fall. He does not watch him long. He turns back, and Luke is there. Luke is already there, crossing the floor on his hands and knees when he should not be able to cross anything, and Vader allows himself to be lowered, to sit against the wall with the shaft behind him, and the burning superstructure above him, and his son's hand pressed flat against the chest panel that is no longer responding correctly. "I have to save you," Luke says. His voice is not what it was. The lightning took something from it. "There's a medical bay if I can reach the Luke." His own voice surprises him. No mask. The respirator is damaged. It vents improperly now, and the sound it makes is wrong. But the voice underneath is his. He had almost forgotten what it sounded like. "Listen to me." Luke does. He always does. That was the thing about him. He actually listened. Vader spent 2 years trying to break that quality out of the boy and never managed it. The suit is compromised. The respirator is... He stops. Breathes. Each breath costs more than the last, and he is paying with a currency he is nearly out of. "You need to go. The reactor is destabilizing. I'm not leaving you. I know." And he does. It is one of many things he knows about this boy that he should have been there to learn in real time. You won't leave anyone behind. You never have. Something crosses Luke's face. Not disagreement. Recognition. A son recognizing himself in language his father didn't know he was using. "I'm going to get you to the shuttle," Luke says. It is not a question. He doesn't have the air left to argue. He lets the boy take his arm. Luke is stronger than he looks. That was always true. He gets Vader upright with the kind of effort that belongs to someone running on something beyond muscle, beyond exhaustion, beyond the lightning's after effects still trembling through his nervous system. He gets him moving. The Death Star 2 is shaking, not metaphorically. The floor beneath them actually shakes, a low grinding resonance that says the thing holding you up has decided to stop. Vader knows the sound. He has heard it before, in other structures failing under other circumstances, and the frequency of it now tells him what Luke does not yet understand, what he will not tell Luke. Because Luke would stop moving and he needs Luke to keep moving. They reach the hangar. Luke finds a shuttle, Imperial Lambda class. The ramp lowers. The lights inside are emergency red. Luke gets him up the ramp and into the hold and into the co-pilot chair that is not built for a man in full armor and does not care. He gets the engines online. The Death Star 2 stops shaking and starts screaming. "Go," Vader says. Luke goes. The shuttle clears the bay as the first reactor cascade begins. Through the viewport, the Death Star 2 becomes light, not all at once, in stages, each stage larger than the last, like something practicing how to be an explosion before committing to it fully. Luke flies through the debris field the way Luke always flies, too fast. Too precise, with a confidence that shouldn't work at those speeds, and somehow does every time. Vader watches the station die. He does not feel victorious. He feels the respirator labor. He feels the chest panel, the manual override for everything that keeps him alive in the most literal sense, flicker under his fingers. He closes his hand around it and holds. Luke has not looked away from the viewport. He is threading the shuttle through wreckage with both hands on the controls and the entirety of whatever he has left focused forward. He hasn't spoken since go. Good. Vader doesn't have the air for a conversation. He has air for this. Luke. Luke turns. The red emergency light makes him look younger than he is. He already looks young. Sometimes that has been unbearable. Looking at him and knowing how old he should have been allowed to get before Vader's own choices made the galaxy dangerous for his son to exist in. Now it is simply true. He is young. He is alive. He is here. Your sister, Vader says. She needs to know. Something shifts in Luke's face. He processes this, that your sister means Vader knows, that it has always meant Vader knows, that the confession carries inside it the quiet weight of "I found out, and I didn't use it against you." Against her. He chose, at some point between the revelation and this shuttle, not to. "Tell her," Vader says. "Everything. I will." Luke's voice has found something underneath the damage. Certainty. We'll have time. You can tell her yourself. Vader looks at him. He doesn't say, "I won't." He doesn't say, "You know I won't." He doesn't say any of the true things that are also the cruel things, because Luke is flying with his hands and navigating with the Force, and surviving on what little he has left, and there is no version of this moment that benefits from precision. He says, "I know." Luke turns back to the controls. Vader watches the stars properly, for the first time in a long time, without a viewport filtered by a mask's HUD overlay. They are just stars. Bright points against dark space. He always knew, academically, that they looked like this. He forgot what it meant to see them. He holds the chest panel closed. He breathes. The shuttle drops into the upper atmosphere of Endor, and far below, through the curve of the moon's horizon, he can see the fires of celebration already beginning, small and scattered, growing, the rebel fleet, the moon itself, something in the Force that feels like a held breath released after 23 years. He breathes. He holds the panel closed. He breathes. The respirator labors. He breathes. He makes 3 trips. The first is for Luke. He carries him out of the shuttle the way you carry something you are afraid to damage further, slowly with both arms, with the kind of deliberate care that costs more than speed would. The forest of Endor receives them in silence. Ancient trees, ancient dark, the distant sound of celebration from somewhere deeper in the canopy. He ignores it. He finds the rise above the valley, the small clearing with the line of sight to open sky, and he lays Luke down on the moss and returns to the shuttle. The second trip is nothing. He passes the emergency kit, med packs, rations, a survival blanket. He doesn't touch any of it. There is nothing in that pack for what he needs. The third trip is for wood. He works the forest edge with his hands. Not the lightsaber, not the Force. His hands. The mechanical one and the suited one. He breaks branches from fallen timber. He drags them to the clearing and stacks them the way his mother taught him to build a fire on Tatooine. The shape of it. The structure that catches and holds. He has not thought about that in decades. His hands remember it anyway. He works for the better part of an hour. His respirator counts each breath. He does not count them. When the pyre is built, he lays Luke on it. He removes the cape. His cape. The black one, which he covered Luke with in the shuttle hold, and sets it aside. Luke is in his Jedi blacks. The tunic, the belt, the simple boots of a man who chose an aesthetic of no-frills duty. He looks very young. The narration needs only to say so once, without elaboration, because elaboration would be a form of dishonesty. There is no frame for this that makes it larger than what it is. Anakin stands at the edge of the pyre. He ignites his lightsaber. Red. The last time this blade will be red. He touches it to the base of the wood and steps back as the fire catches. The forest turns amber. The shadows of the ancient trees stretch long and warm across the moss. He powers down the blade and he watches the fire and he says, "Once, to the dark and the smoke and the sound of crackling wood, your mother's funeral was on Naboo." The respirator. They gave her a procession through the city. All of Theed. A breath. I wasn't there. The fire says nothing. The fire simply burns. I'm here now. In the Ewok village, 2 kilometers through the canopy, Leia Organa is surrounded by the sound of people who believe the war is over. Drums, torches passing hand to hand. The language of celebration in a language she doesn't speak, but understands by texture. The specific looseness of people who have been afraid for a long time and suddenly aren't. Han's arm has found her shoulders without him quite announcing it, the way Han does things he won't admit to doing. Chewbacca is somewhere behind her making a sound she has learned, over years, to identify as satisfied. The fleet is in orbit. The Death Star is ash. Leia should feel something. She is running an inventory of what she should feel and finding the account empty. Then the bottom drops out. It is not gradual, not a creeping dread. The place in her chest where Luke has always been, that warmth she never had a name for until he gave her one, that twin frequency she registered as instinct for 23 years, it is simply gone. Not quieted. Gone. The difference between a fire burning low and a fire that has stopped existing. She goes still under Han's arm. The drums continue. Someone near her is laughing. The torchlight moves across her face and she does not move. Hey. Han's voice, low, close to her ear. You okay? She turns to him. Her face is doing something he hasn't seen it do before, and he is a man who has watched her face through more impossible situations than most people survive. She says, "Something happened to Luke." Not a question. No qualifier, no hope appended. The pure knowledge of the Force delivered in Leia Organa's most precise diction. A sentence containing no room for reassurance. Han's arm goes tight around her for a moment. Then they are moving. They see the fire through the trees before they reach the clearing. Han has his blaster out. The rebel strike team fans around him. Ewoks at the periphery with spears lowered. Chewbacca already growling the low sustained frequency that means I am prepared to kill whatever this is. Leia is at the front. She told Han not to put her at the back, and he knew better than to try. The clearing opens around them, and they stop. A funeral pyre. Burning clean and high in the dark of the ancient forest. A figure atop it dressed in black. And standing before it, back to them, absolutely still, a figure in black armor that every sentient being in the galaxy who has spent the last 2 decades paying attention would recognize on the dark side of the moon at range. The respirator is audible from 30 meters. Wrong laboring, the suit is damaged in ways that are visible even in the firelight. The chest panel open on one side. Clamped with something improvised, sparking. The red lightsaber is in his right hand, deactivated. He turns. The faceplate is cracked. The lens of one eye is dark. He is looking at them, at her, and he is not raising the weapon. He is not doing anything except standing between them and the fire, and breathing the way a man breathes when breathing has become an act that requires full attention. Leia looks past him. At the pyre. At the black tunic visible through the flames. The simple Jedi boots. The silhouette of a man who was her brother for 1 year of her life, and her brother for 23 years before she knew it. Her voice, when it comes, is very quiet, not fragile. Quiet the way a precision instrument is quiet. Luke. She does not ask if it is Luke. She does not ask what happened. The Force told her what happened, and her eyes are confirming it, and there is no version of this that requires additional information. She draws her blaster. Both hands, the way she was trained, the way a senator's daughter from a dead planet holds a weapon when she is deciding whether she is going to use it. Her hands are shaking, not from fear, not from cold, from the effort of a person who has kept herself together through things that should have broken her twice over, and is now standing at the exact edge of what it is physically possible to keep together any longer. She points it at Vader's cracked faceplate. You killed him. Not an accusation seeking confirmation. Not a question of guilt. A statement being used as the last word before something final. The respirator. The fire. The dark of the ancient forest. Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, does something that Darth Vader would never do. He reaches down, slowly, telegraphing every movement with the care of a man who understands exactly what kind of creature is aiming at him, and what it would take to make her pull the trigger. He sets the lightsaber on the ground, the red blade that has ended things. Dozens of things, hundreds of things, he sets it in the moss like it is something he is done with. He goes to his knees. Not as a feint, not as a tactical position from which he is calculating the angle for a reversal. He folds, deliberately, down into the dirt of Endor, and he bows his head. When his voice comes through the broken respirator, it is not begging. It is the flat delivery of a man who has run his own mathematics and arrived at a specific conclusion. Then, shoot me. Han Solo's blaster is up. He is watching Leia, not Vader. He will follow her lead, not because he agreed to, not because someone told him to, but because Han Solo, in the calculus of this specific moment, understands that this is not his moment, and has the self-knowledge to stand down. Chewbacca makes a sound that is not a growl. It is something older and quieter than a growl. Leia does not fire. She does not lower the blaster either. The fire burns behind the armored shape on its knees in the dirt. Luke burns. 23 years of a brother she never held as an infant, never knew was hers. 1 year of the truest certainty she has ever felt about another human being. Burns. And the man responsible is on his knees in front of her, in the dark, with his head bowed, and she has every reason, and every right, and every capacity to end it here. She does not fire. The fire burns. 12 hours. That is how long it takes the Rebel Alliance to decide what to do with Darth Vader, and in that 12 hours Anakin Skywalker sits on the floor of a shuttle hold in magnetic shackles and waits. The shackles are improvised, clamped to his wrist rings and chest panel by Rebel engineers, who worked with the specific focus of people who have been told to solve a problem they are terrified of. They did good work. He could tell them so. He doesn't. The shuttle smells like hydraulic fluid and fear. 6 soldiers in the hold with him, none of them looking directly at him, all of them positioned in the geometry of people who want maximum distance from a single point. He is the point. He watches them without moving, and they watch the walls and the floor and the forward bulkhead and everything except him, and after a while he stops watching them too, because there is nothing there that requires his attention. He thinks about Luke instead. He has been doing this with the controlled regularity of a man performing a necessary medical procedure on himself, allowing it in measured increments, closing it off before it becomes something that prevents function. Luke on the throne room floor. Luke's voice. I knew there was still good in you. The particular quality of certainty in that voice, which was not hope. Hope has doubt in it, but something without doubt. something that had already arrived at its conclusion and was simply waiting for the universe to catch up. He had been right. The universe caught up. It cost him everything. The shuttle docks with Home 1. He hears the clamps engage before the pilot announces it. He got to his feet, slowly, because the suit is still wrong in ways that will be wrong until someone with engineering skill and access to Imperial parts fixes them, and the 6 soldiers rearranged themselves into an escort formation that kept him at its center with 3 meters of clearance on all sides. They moved through Home 1 like a disturbance in water. Word traveled faster than he did. He could see it, the way a corridor would be occupied and then, at some point ahead of his arrival, would not be. Personnel pressing into side passages, into doorways, going very still in the specific way of people who have been told to clear a path for something dangerous. Children were removed. He noted that. A woman in a medical uniform turned a corner ahead of him and saw the escort and immediately put herself behind a sealed hatch. He heard the hatch lock. He had built this specific quality of fear, this precise radius of absence around his presence. He had built it deliberately, maintained it, weaponized it, for 2 decades. It had never felt like anything before. Information, mostly, useful information about the tactical landscape. It felt like something now. They put him in a munitions vault on a lower deck. Reinforced walls, 1 security camera mounted in the upper corner, a power tap that his escort had the minimal grace to connect to his chest panel without being asked. The floor was metal. He sat on it. The door sealed. He waited. On the command deck of Home 1, Mon Mothma had not slept either. She stood at the head of the tactical table with the kind of stillness that was not calm but its precise imitation, the quality she had practiced across a lifetime of Senate sessions and alliance councils, and moments when the wrong expression on her face could end negotiations or begin wars. Around the table, Akbar, Madine, 3 senior fleet officers, and the particular tension of people who have won something enormous and discovered, in the winning, a new problem they don't have the architecture to solve. The holographic display above the table showed the pattern: scattered Imperial fleet elements, the survivors of Endor, the regional Moffs, the Star Destroyers that had been on deployment when the Death Star died, moving, not retreating randomly, moving with a logic she couldn't read yet, but could feel the shape of, the way you feel a current in water before you see it. Sentinel droids. 3 confirmed signals in as many hours. Necronus, Abednego, a relay station in the Outer Rim whose designation she'd had to look up. Operation Cinder is already in motion, Akbar said. He said it without emphasis, which was its own kind of emphasis. Whatever the Emperor encoded into those droids activated the moment Endor confirmed his death. We are behind this. How far behind? Madine asked. Days, perhaps less in some systems. Mon Mothma looked at the map. Planets. Each marker on that map was 1 billion people, or 10 billion people, or 2 billion people, who had already lost everything they knew once, and were waiting, without knowing they were waiting, to lose it again. She thought about Alderaan and then stopped thinking about Alderaan, because she could not afford to think about Alderaan right now. We have one asset with complete knowledge of Operation Cinder's deployment architecture, she said. He is not an asset, Madine said. He is a war criminal in a vault. Both things can be true simultaneously. The doors opened, not through any malfunction, through Han Solo, who had apparently decided that the magnetic locks on Home 1's command deck were a suggestion. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the room with the particular expression of a man who has had 12 hours of not grieving and has just run out of not. He was still in the clothes he'd worn on Endor. His jacket had blood on the left sleeve, not his, from the evacuation, and he hadn't noticed yet, or hadn't cared yet, and either way hadn't done anything about it. He looked at the tactical display. He looked at Mon Mothma. He said, "I want him dead." Not a request. Not quite a statement of position. The sound of a conclusion arrived at through a route he was not going to explain or justify, because justification was for situations where there was legitimate doubt about whether the conclusion was correct. Mon Mothma said, "Captain Solo. He killed Luke." The words landed in the room like something thrown. "He froze me and sold me to Jabba. He destroyed Alderaan. He personally tortured Leia on the Death Star. A pause. Whatever he can tell you, whatever he knows about whatever Cinder thing is on that map, it isn't worth it. It isn't close to worth it. Tell that, Mon Mothma said, to the planets already on Operation Cinder's list. Han looked at the map. She watched him look at it. She watched him do the math that she had done 3 hours ago in this same room at this same display, and she watched him arrive, with visible reluctance, at the same place she had. He didn't say anything else. He found a chair at the far end of the table and sat in it with his arms crossed and his eyes fixed on the middle distance. And Mon Mothma understood that this was Han Solo's version of acquiescence and chose not to name it out loud. She went to the vault herself. Because she was that kind of leader, not by instinct, by decision, the ongoing decision she remade every day to be the kind of leader who delivered difficult things in person. She told the guards to open the door. She went in alone. The soldiers outside did not like this, and she did not ask for their opinion. He rose when she entered. She hadn't expected that. The magnetic shackles limited his range of motion. Rising from the floor with a damaged suit and clamped wrist rings was not an easy motion, but he performed it without hesitation, with the automatic quality of a habit so deeply embedded it preceded conscious thought. He had risen when Palpatine entered a room for 23 years. He rose now. She noted the difference in what the gesture meant when directed at her versus what it had meant then. And filed it. She told him the terms. Conditional operational freedom, escort at all times, no solo movement, no access to communications without supervision. His lightsaber returned only for combat situations and recovered immediately after. One escape attempt, one unauthorized action, and the arrangement ended permanently. She watched him process this. His face was. She stopped herself from thinking of it as his face, then reconsidered, because it was his face, damaged and scarred, but human. And part of what she was deciding here was whether to extend to it the framework she extended to faces. He processed the terms and did not negotiate them and did not thank her for them. He simply said understood. She looked at him for a moment. The vault was very quiet. The respirator. Then she said, "Prove what Luke believed." She turned and left before she could think about whether she meant it or whether she was simply using the only currency she had correctly identified as having value to this specific person. Perhaps both. Perhaps that was acceptable. The war room was not designed for the atmosphere it contained. Rebel tacticians who had spent careers running from the shape now standing at their holographic display. Akbar, who had fought this man across a dozen fleet engagements. Madine, who had designed extraction operations specifically to avoid triggering his attention. Officers who had conducted threat assessments with his name at the top of the document for so long that it had become reflexive, categorical, Vader, threat, maximum, no engagement protocol. He stood at the display in his shackles, and he dismantled Operation Cinder system by system. Not with emotion, not with apology or performance. He presented Star Destroyer registry numbers and their assigned Cinder targets. Satnet satellite deployment sequences. The specific captains running each operation. Their tactical tendencies. Their personal command styles. The particular professional vanities that could be exploited to delay action. He knew all of it. He had built all of it, or overseen its building, or signed the orders that made it operational. He delivered the information with the flat precision of a man who has decided that the only thing left is use, and intends to be used completely. He prioritized Naboo first. He did not explain why. No one in the room asked yet. They were writing too fast, cross-referencing too urgently. Later, some of them would understand. Later was not now. When the briefing ended, he said, "I'll need my lightsaber for the boarding actions." Akbar looked at Mon Mothma. The silence lasted 4 seconds, which was long enough to contain everything. Mon Mothma said, "Not yet." Anakin Skywalker nodded. He had not expected yet. He was playing a longer game than yet. She comes alone. That detail matters. Leia Organa, princess of a dead planet, general of the Rebel Alliance, woman who has never in her adult life entered a situation without knowing exactly where the exits are. She comes to the vault alone, without escort, without informing Han. At 0300 hours, when the corridors of Home 1 are as close to empty as a warship ever gets. The guards outside the vault door look at her, and she looks back at them, with the specific quality of authority that does not request compliance, but assumes it. And after a moment they step aside. She tells them to wait at the corridor junction. 30 meters. They go. She opens the vault door herself. He is sitting on the floor against the far wall, which is where he was when Mon Mothma left 6 hours ago, and where he has been since, because there is nowhere else to be, and he is not a man who paces. The single security camera in the corner has a small piece of tape over its lens. She did that on the way in, from the monitoring station down the corridor, because whatever happens in this room is not for the record. She closes the door behind her. He looks at her. He does not rise this time. She thinks this might be a choice. Rising for Mon Mothma was a reflex, a chain of command acknowledgement, something his body knew how to do. With her it is different. With her he stays on the floor and looks up at her and waits, because he understands that the power dynamic in this room is hers to define, and he will not take that from her. She stands in the center of the vault with her arms at her sides, and she looks at him for a long time without speaking. The respirator fills the silence. In and out. The wrong quality, slightly labored still. The damage from Palpatine's lightning not yet fully compensated by the jury-rigged repair. She focuses on that sound because it gives her something specific to concentrate on that isn't the fact of him, the whole fact of him, the accumulated weight of everything he is and has been in her life before she knew he existed in it. She says, "Tell me about Alderaan." Not, "Why?" Not, "How could you?" Not any of the versions of this question that are really just pain wearing the grammar of inquiry. She asks for the account, the specific operational account. She has learned over years of war that specificity is the only framework that holds when abstraction would destroy you. He is quiet for a moment. Not evasion, consideration. He is deciding how to tell the truth about this in a way that is actually the truth rather than the version of it that costs him less. "I was there," he says. "On the Death Star. I was in the room when Tarkin gave the order." A pause. The respirator. "I did not stop it. You could have." Yes, the word sits in the vault like a physical object. He doesn't append anything to it. No context, no mitigating factor, no architecture of explanation. Yes, he could have stopped it, and he didn't. And he is not going to construct a defense of that, because there isn't one. She watches him not construct the defense, and something in her, some small mechanism she has been holding closed with both hands, since Endor, makes a sound like a hinge stressed past its tolerance. She crosses the vault in 4 steps and hits him, not with the Force. She doesn't know yet that she has the Force in the way that it would answer a command like that. She hits him with her hand, open-palmed, across the damaged faceplate. The sound of it is wrong, flesh against cracked mask, and her hand registers the impact as a mistake, because he is still partially armored, and she has hurt herself, and she doesn't care. She hits him again. He does not move to stop her. He takes it the way the vault floor takes it, without response, without reaction, present and absorbing and offering nothing back. She stops. Her hand is pressed flat against the side of his faceplate. She is breathing the way you breathe when your body has done something before your mind finished the sentence that would have authorized it. His head has turned slightly with the impact and not turned back. He is looking at the wall. 2 billion people, she says. Her voice has a quality she has heard in other people's voices in extremity and never expected to hear in her own. My mother. My father. Every person I knew before I was old enough to know I'd have to memorize them. Every street, every building, every. She stops. She does not have the capacity right now for the full inventory. She has never had the capacity for the full inventory. She doesn't think she ever will. 2 billion people. Yes, he says again. She takes her hand away from his face and steps back. She is crying. She notes this the way you note unexpected weather, with the specific detachment of someone who has been surprised by their own body's decision. She does not stop it, because stopping it would require an energy she doesn't have, and because there is no one here whose opinion of her tears she needs to manage. Only him, and he has forfeited the standing to assess her. She sits down on the floor. Not near him, across the vault, back against the opposite wall. The floor is cold, and the vault is humming with the low-frequency resonance of a warship systems, and she sits in it and breathes, and after a while the crying stops in the unceremonious way that crying stops when the body runs out of the fuel that drives it. He has not moved. He is still looking at the wall. She says, "Luke told me about you before he went to the Death Star. A shift in him. Nothing visible. Something she perceives without being able to explain the mechanism of the perception. He is listening with the whole quality of his attention. He told me there was still good in you." She examines this sentence from the inside, testing its structure. I told him he was wrong. I told him Vader was a name for something that used to be a person, the respirator. He said, she stops. Because what Luke said was I have to try, and the word try now has a specific weight it didn't have before. Because he did try, and the trying killed him, and she is sitting on a floor in a vault at 300 hours across from the man who she looks at him directly. Did he suffer? The question takes the vault apart and reassembles it around different architecture. This is not the anger question. This is not the political question or the tactical question or any of the questions she came here prepared to ask. This is the one underneath all of them. The one that has been sitting at the base of her chest since she saw the pyre on Endor, and has not moved. Anakin looks at her. He turns his head fully toward her for the first time since she sat down. "No," he says. "It was fast." "He was," the respirator labors, briefly, as if the suit is registering something the man inside is registering. "He was trying to save me. He looked at me when..." He stops. Something in the mechanical cadence of his breathing becomes effortful in a way that is not mechanical. He wasn't afraid. She absorbs this. She holds it the way you hold something you aren't sure yet whether it helps. He was never afraid of the things he should have been afraid of, she says. Not bitterly. As an observation. As one of the true things about her brother that she has had exactly 1 year to learn and is now carrying alone. "No," Anakin says. He wasn't. The silence that follows is different from the silences that preceded it. The previous silences had structure, anger filling them, or grief or the held breath of two people deciding whether the conversation was safe to continue. This silence is simply two people in a vault at 0300 hours who have both lost the same person and are sitting with that fact in each other's presence. After a while she says, "He talked about our mother." Anakin goes very still. He didn't know much. Just that she was kind. Leia looks at her hands in her lap, the one that hit him, the knuckles still registering the decision. Is that true? He is quiet for long enough that she thinks he might not answer. Then, "She was the kindest person I ever knew." His voice through the respirator has changed. Not softer, that isn't quite the word. Stripped of something. She would argue a point until you wanted to disappear, and then she'd win, and then she'd make sure you were fed. A pause. She was relentless. She never. He stops. Breathes. She never stopped believing people could be better than they were. Leia is quiet. "She would have loved you," he says. "She would have argued with you constantly." Leia looks up. She would have been so proud. The vault hums around them. The respirator counts its breaths. Leia does not cry again. She is very still, in the way of someone who has encountered a truth that requires a stillness equal to its weight. After a long moment she says, "Tell me more." And he does. The emergency tone on Home One's command deck is a single sustained note, not a klaxon. Not an alarm designed to produce panic, but a precise signal engineered to move people quickly from one cognitive state to another. Akbar heard it at 0617 hours, and was at his station before the tone completed its first cycle. 3 signals. Incoming simultaneously. Naboo's orbital sensor network had detected unauthorized satellite deployment. 12 objects. Satnet configuration. Descending into synchronous orbit from a Victory-class Star Destroyer running registry number 7742. The colonial governor of Vardos was transmitting a Mayday atmospheric pressure readings off standard by a factor that didn't make physical sense unless something above the cloud line was introducing variables. A colonial outpost on Burnin Khan had been mid-transmission when it simply stopped. Not interference. Termination. Akbar looked at the three signals on his display and understood, with the specific clarity of a military mind that has been planning for contingencies long enough to recognize when one arrives, exactly what he was looking at. Operation Cinder is live, he said. The officers around him did not need him to elaborate. Get me fleet positions on every Star Destroyer in the Outer Rim. The answer came back in 90 seconds, and it was worse than the question. They did not have the fleet strength. That was the arithmetic of it, stripped of language, reduced to what was actually true. The Battle of Endor had cost them. Victory always costs something. They had known this going in and absorbed the cost willingly. What they had not fully modeled was the specific shape of the cost and the aftermath, the gap between what Endor required and what post-Endor demanded. The Star Destroyers deploying SatNet were armed, crewed, and operating with the particular focused lethality of ships executing a pre-planned directive from a dead emperor. They were not improvising. They were completing. 3 systems, 3 simultaneous operations, 2 available fleet elements capable of sustained engagement at that scale. The math produced one answer, and the answer was, someone burns. Mon Mothma had been awake since 0400, not from premonition, from the specific insomnia of a leader who has won a war and discovered, in the 48 hours following, that the winning has created a vacuum that fills faster than anyone planned for. She was in her quarters reviewing the first draft of a peace framework when the alert reached her. She was on the command deck 4 minutes later. She stood at Akbar's display and walked through it, not as performance, not as the public language of leadership, but as genuine analysis, the kind she did alone, without audience, when the options had to be tested against each other with full honesty about what each one cost. Option 1. Divide the available fleet across all 3 systems. Outcome: insufficient force concentration at each point, probable military defeat, and the SatNet continues deploying regardless. 3 planets burn. The Alliance loses ships it cannot replace. Option 2. Concentrate force on Naboo, the most strategically visible target. Outcome: Naboo has a chance. Vardos and Burnin Khan do not. The political calculus of choosing which populations are worth saving, which she would then have to explain to those populations or their survivors. Option 3. Negotiate. Transmit on Imperial frequencies. Invoke surrender protocols. Attempt to reach the Star Destroyer commanders before full SatNet lock. Outcome: unknown and time-sensitive. Imperial commanders executing Operation Cinder were operating under a dead Emperor's sealed orders. Their legal loyalty structure had evaporated. Some would be reachable, some would not. She had no way to know which category each captain fell into. She needed the intelligence to know. She needed it in the next 4 hours, before the SatNet achieved full orbital lock and the window for interdiction closed. She knew where the intelligence was. Leia did not wait to be called. She found Mon Mothma in the corridor outside the command deck, found her the way Leia found things she had decided to find, which was by moving toward them at a pace that assumed arrival was inevitable. Mon Mothma looked at her, and the expression on Mon Mothma's face was the expression of a woman who had been about to walk toward this same conversation from the opposite direction. "I know what you're going to say," Mon Mothma said. "Then I'll save us both time," Leia said. The briefing room off the command deck was empty. They went there. Han was in the corridor. She hadn't told him she was going to Mon Mothma, and he had found her anyway, which was typical, and she did not have the energy to be frustrated by it, because she needed everything she had for this. He came in. He stood by the wall. She made the argument. Cleanly, without embellishment, in the precise language she had been trained to use when the argument needed to carry its own weight, without the speaker's reputation doing work on its behalf. The Alliance had an asset in custody with complete knowledge of the Cinder deployment architecture. That asset had demonstrated willingness to cooperate. 3 planetary populations were currently being targeted. The decision was tactical, not personal. She was not advocating for him. She was advocating for Naboo, for Vardos, for Burnin Khan. These were different things, Han said. Leia. Not her title. Not her rank. Just her name, in the voice he used when he was asking her to stop and look at him, which was rare enough that it worked. "I know what I'm doing," she said. "I know you do." He wasn't angry. That was the thing that made it harder. The anger she could have worked with, could have moved around. He was simply a man who had lost his closest friend 36 hours ago and was watching the woman he loved make a decision that required interacting extensively with the man who killed him. And he was asking her, quietly, not to. "I'm asking you not to." She looked at him. She held the look long enough to let him know she had heard him, that she understood the weight of what he was asking, and the weight of what she was choosing, and that she was not making the choice lightly or without the full accounting of its cost. "Luke died for those people too," she said. Han didn't have an answer. He looked at the floor, and then at the wall, and then, finally, at Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma looked back at him with the face of someone who had made a decision before Leia walked in, and was now confirming it. He pushed off the wall, and left. He didn't slam the door. That was worse. Mon Mothma went to the vault herself. Anakin rose when she entered. She delivered the terms, the same terms she had outlined the day before, now with the operational addendum, immediate transfer to the command deck under escort. Full intelligence cooperation on Cinder deployment, involvement in planning the interdiction actions. 1 escape attempt, 1 unauthorized action, termination. She looked at him when she finished. "Prove what Luke believed," she said. She left before he could answer. She had learned in the last 2 days that the pauses in that particular conversation cost her more than she had available to spend. He stood at the holographic tactical display in the center of the command deck, and the room rearranged itself around him in the specific way of people who cannot leave, because duty requires them to stay, and cannot stay without every animal instinct they possess telling them to move. He did not editorialize. He presented. Star Destroyer Undying Will, Naboo Operation, Captain Gratlow, commanding. Gratlow was cautious to the point of rigidity. He would not deviate from sealed orders, but he was slow to engage civilian targets without direct authorization from a superior. That hesitation was a window of approximately 6 hours before full SATNet lock. Exploitable if a rebel interdiction force could present a credible reason for delay. Iron Meridian, Vardos Operation, Commander Vetch. Different profile. Vetch was ambitious, and Cinder was his chance to demonstrate loyalty to whatever emerged from the Imperial command vacuum. He would move fast, and he would not hesitate. Vardos needed a ship and system within 4 hours, or the weather disruption began and could not be reversed. Burnin Khan was already past the window. He said so, without softening it, because the room needed the truth about Burnin Khan more than it needed to be managed. The officers wrote it down. Someone would have to tell the people there something that wasn't the full truth until the full truth was survivable. That was Mon Mothma's burden, not his. He identified 12 additional Cinder operations at various stages of activation. He ranked them by time sensitivity and by the vulnerability profile of the Imperial commanders running them. He walked the room through the authentication codes for Imperial HoloNet military frequencies. The override strings that, transmitted on the right channel in the right sequence, could introduce 48 hours of administrative confusion into any Cinder operation not yet in full deployment. He had designed the security architecture himself. He knew every door. The room was very quiet while he talked. Not the quiet of an empty space, the quiet of people listening at maximum capacity, writing faster than was comfortable, running mental calculations against the information as it arrived. Officers who had conducted threat assessments with his name at the top of the document for a decade were now writing his words down as fast as they came. When he finished, Akbar looked at Mon Mothma. Something passed between them. The wordless language of two people who have served in the same war long enough to communicate in shorthand. Anakin said, "I'll need my lightsaber for the boarding actions." Akbar looked at Mon Mothma. 4 seconds. "Not yet," Mon Mothma said. Anakin nodded. He hadn't expected yet. Yet was information. Yet meant the timeline was moving in a direction that eventually arrived somewhere. He was playing a longer game than yet. The crystal is the size of his thumbnail. He holds it in his mechanical palm, the gauntlet removed, the bare architecture of his prosthetic hand exposed in the low light of the modified bunk, and looks at it. Red. The deep arterial red of a kyber crystal that has been subjected to a will that did not ask what the crystal wanted, only what it needed to become. He did this to it himself, 23 years ago, in the early weeks of the suit when everything was pain and rage, and Palpatine's voice filling the spaces where other voices used to be. The Jedi understood what Sith practice confirmed from the other direction. Kyber crystals were not inert. They responded. They were, in whatever way a stone could be said to be alive. Alive, attuned to the Force, shaped by it, changed by prolonged contact with a will that imposed itself upon them rather than working with what they offered. This crystal had bled red because he had made it. Because he had brought to it everything he was in those first months, and the crystal had absorbed it and become it. He can feel it still. Even through the mechanical palm, through the neural interface that translates sensation into something his damaged nervous system can interpret, he can feel the crystal's particular frequency. Compressed grief. Rage that has been burning so long it has become structural rather than active. The way an old fire's char becomes part of the wood it consumed. He does not force it back. He has learned, across 23 years of being a man who forced things, what forcing costs. He offers it a choice instead. He opens. Not physically, the hand stays still. He opens inward. In the way that Jedi meditation was always described to him as a young man, and that he was never quite patient enough to practice properly then, when he was 19 and certain that he was the most powerful Force user alive, and patience was for people who needed it. He opens, and into that opening he pours everything he is carrying, not selectively. All of it. Luke's face on the throne room floor. Leia in the vault, hitting him with her open hand, then asking about their mother in the voice of someone reaching through a wall. The pyre burning on Endor, the smell of the wood catching. 2 billion people he did not stop being killed. Han Solo's face when Leia said Luke died for those people too. The weight of 23 years described not as a period of time but as a series of specific moments that each had a specific cost, and each are still outstanding. He pours it in, and he holds it, and he waits. The crystal changes. Not instantly. Nothing real happens instantly. And he no longer trusts things that do. It takes 20 minutes by his internal count. The red deepens first, which alarms him, and which he absorbs without reacting to. Because reacting would close what he has opened, and closing it now would mean starting over. Then the red begins to shift at its center. Not fading, but transforming. The way iron transforms in heat. The way a thing that has been one thing long enough to seem permanent reveals that permanence was never the right word for it. White, first at the core, then spreading outward until the red is gone entirely, and what he is holding in his mechanical palm is a crystal the color of no allegiance, no side, no war. He sits with it for a moment. He allows himself this moment, a small and private one, the kind he has not had in longer than he can calculate. Something that is not peace exactly, but adjacent to it. The room it might grow into, if given time. He reassembles the hilt. His hands know the work without instruction. He has modified lightsabers more times than he can count. Designed his own from components. Repaired damage from combat. The crystal seats correctly. The housing closes. He ignites it. White blade. Clean and burning and affiliated with nothing except the Force itself, which has no color and no side and has been waiting, he thinks, with considerably more patience than he deserved. He extinguishes it. He sets it on the bunk beside him. He allows himself the moment. Then he closes the bunk's equipment locker and prepares for what comes next. The suit, in its new configuration, looks like a man trying to stop being a symbol. The rebel mechanics had worked on it for 6 hours under protest. Not their protest. The suits, which resisted modification the way anything built by Imperial engineers resisted non-Imperial interference. The core life support units remained. The chest panel, the back regulators, the respiratory system that still breathed with the wrong quality, but breathed. The gauntlets were back. The black was gone, replaced with gray plating, not painted, stripped. The base material of the Imperial armor underneath, which was the color of something functional rather than something designed to be seen and feared. No helmet. In its place, a breath mask, a rebel medical unit's design, rigged by a tech named Orval who had not looked at Anakin's face once during the entire fitting and whom Anakin had not required to. The mask covered the lower half of his face, the respirator integrated cleanly, and above it his eyes were visible. The burns, scarring on his scalp, and the upper face, the hairless vulnerability of it. The blue eyes that did not match the mythology of Darth Vader in any register. No cape. He looked like a man. A large, damaged, mechanical man. But a man. He was in the hangar running a final check on the team's equipment loadout when Han Solo stopped walking. Not slowed, stopped, mid-stride, as if the image in front of him had required a full reboot of the processing system. Anakin looked up. Han looked at him. Chewbacca, behind Han, made a sound that landed somewhere between recognition and profound unease. Han said, "You look like hell." Anakin continued the equipment check. The plating took 3 hours to strip. The mechanics were thorough. A pause. Han was still looking at him with the expression of someone recalibrating a threat assessment that no longer fits the data. "What are you calling yourself?" Anakin set down the equipment manifest. He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, because it was a serious question, more serious than Han Solo probably knew he was asking. The name Vader belonged to something he had been. He had been Vader for long enough that some people believed that was all there was. Some days, for long enough, he had believed it too. "Anakin," he said. Han blinked. He looked at the gray plating and the breath mask and the white-hilted lightsaber at his belt, and then back at the face, the actual face, which was something he had not looked at directly before. He nodded slowly, with the careful quality of a man making an internal adjustment he will not be explaining out loud. "Okay," he said. He walked past. Chewbacca lingered for 2 seconds longer, studying him with dark, intelligent eyes, then followed Han. That was the scene. Sometimes that was all a scene needed to be. The Implacable sat in Naboo's high orbit like a declaration of intent. Victory-class Star Destroyer, older configuration, 12 SatNet satellites already deployed in descending spiral toward atmosphere. 4 more in the launch queue. Captain Gratlow was running behind his own timetable, not from hesitation, from a targeting system error in the satellite guidance package that his engineers had been troubleshooting for 6 hours. 6 hours. The window Anakin had identified in the war room, the window built into Gratlow's profile. It had held. The rebel fleet kept the Implacable's complement occupied at range, X-wings and B-wings running interdiction patterns, keeping the Star Destroyer's attention on the engagement above, while the stolen TIE transport running IF codes from a captured shuttle made its approach from below. Beneath the engagement envelope, 300 meters off Naboo's cloud line. In the transport's hold, 12 rebel commandos, Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Anakin Skywalker. The airlock sequence took 40 seconds. The hangar bay pressure equalized, and the ramp went down, and the team moved. 30 meters of open hangar floor between the transport and the nearest cover. Anakin ran it with them. Not ahead, not behind. In formation. The gray suit moving at a pace that the rebel commandos had not expected from a man in partial armor who was running on repaired life support. He heard the first shot before it came. That was not metaphor. That was what the Force did when you worked with it rather than through it. The half-second of foreknowledge that was enough. And he had his lightsaber ignited, and the bolt redirected before the commando on his left registered the threat. White blade in the Implacable's hangar. First time. The stormtroopers at the far end of the base saw it, and something happened in their formation that was not a tactical response. It was recognition. The word moved through Imperial comms in under 4 seconds. He could see it in the way the formation changed, in the way 2 troopers at the left flank turned to each other, rather than maintaining fire discipline. The encrypted chatter would be resolving into language right now. Vader is here. And then, 2 seconds later, the cognitive fracture. Vader is with the rebels. It broke them. Not all of them, the veterans held. The ones whose training ran deep enough to override reflex. But the edges of the formation went soft, and the soft edges let the rebel commandos through, and the commandos did what commandos were trained to do when edges went soft. Anakin deflected. He redirected. He moved through the hangar with the economy of a man who has been doing this for 30 years, and has learned that the difference between a Sith and a Jedi is not the ability, it is the restraint. What he used, reflexes extended by force, enhanced awareness, positioning, never where the shot was, but where the shot wasn't, the lightsaber moving in arcs that intercepted and returned rather than sought. No force choke. No force crush. Nothing weaponized beyond the blade and the enhanced motion and the presence, the specific, enormous, reality-altering presence of Anakin Skywalker in a room, which had always done half the work regardless of anything else. The push toward the command deck took 11 minutes. Han took a blaster graze at the third junction, a glancing hit on the left shoulder plate that staggered him into the corridor wall. Anakin's hand shot out, force-assisted, yanking him back from the opening of the cross corridor where the next shot was already coming. Han, did you just? Satnet control is left. A beat. Han looked at the corridor to the left. At his shoulder. At Anakin. Yeah, left. They went left. The control room had 2 technicians and 1 security officer, none of whom had expected boarders to reach them, and all of whom made the calculation, upon seeing what was standing in the doorway, that the calculation was already complete. Anakin was at the terminal in 90 seconds. His authentication codes ran against the Satnet control architecture, and the architecture recognized them the way a system recognizes its designer's signature, because that is what they were. The satellite stand-down sequencing began. 4 in the launch queue stood down. 8 already deployed began retraction. Naboo's orbital sensor network would register the change in 6 minutes. He keyed the ship-wide comm. This is Anakin Skywalker. His voice, through the breath mask, through the ship's speaker system, filling every corridor and deck and compartment of the implacable. Your Emperor is dead. Operation Cinder is a suicide pact for the galaxy he wanted to punish. Stand down. Surrender to the Rebel Alliance, and you will be treated as prisoners of war. Silence on the ship wide. Not empty silence, the held-breath silence of 1,200 people making a decision they had not been given a framework for. Then, from a corridor outside, from a deck below, the sound of weapons being set on the floor, metal on metal, repeated, spreading through the ship the way a decision spreads when enough people make it at the same time. He powered down the terminal and turned toward the door. They walked back through the implacable in corridors lined with Imperial troops seated on the floor, with their hands visible and their weapons in front of them. Hundreds of them. The rebel commandos moved through with restraint, establishing positions, beginning the surrender protocols they had trained for, but rarely needed at this scale. Anakin walked the length of it. Some of them watched him. The gray plating. The white blade at his belt. The face, visible, damaged and scarred and undeniably, unmistakably, the face of Anakin Skywalker, which was a face none of them had ever seen before today, and which bore no resemblance to the mythology they had served. None of them moved. He did not look at them with triumph, and he did not look at them with contempt. He simply walked. The terror he had built for 23 years was working, for the first time, in a direction that pointed towards something other than ruin. He didn't know yet what to do with that. He kept walking. Kuwat smells like burning metal and industrial scale. The construction yards stretch across the planet's equatorial band in a ring visible from orbit, skeletal Star Destroyer frames hanging in atmospheric cradles, half-built hulls the size of city blocks suspended in magnetic clamps above the cloud line. Automated welding systems still cycling through their programmed sequences as if the Empire's death was an administrative error that would be corrected shortly. The smell reaches them before the shuttle lands. Ozone and plasma and the particular chemical signature of lubricant, burned off by proximity to high-energy fabrication. The smell of the machine that built the machine that ran the war. Leia breathes it in, and catalogs it, and moves. The ground element is 42 rebel commandos, 2 intelligence officers, and 1 general who told Mon Mothma that she was leading this action personally, and received, in response, A silence that Mon Mothma had learned meant I know better than to argue with you about this. The objective, the administrative complex housing the Cinder Fleet Coordination Node, a command and control hub that, if neutralized, would sever the implacable sister ships from their synchronized deployment timetable. Not a battle. A surgical removal. The advance goes well. Too well, which Leia notes and files in the part of her mind that tracks the shape of things. The garrison troops fall back through the yard's interior corridors in a pattern that looks like retreat but has the regularity of something rehearsed. She flags it to the team lead. He nods. They tighten the formation and keep moving. The yards are enormous in the way that makes human-scale language inadequate. Walking beneath a Star Destroyer frame under construction is walking beneath a cathedral that is also a weapon. The lines of it designed for menace as much as function, the sheer displacement of it in the air above you producing a pressure that is partly physical and partly something else, the weight of what it represents. She has been fighting what these things represent since she was 19 years old. She walks under them and does not look up and does not look away. They reach the outer corridor of the administrative complex. The node is 3 levels up. The approach is clean. The blast door ahead opens, and the Death Troopers come through it in a formation that has been waiting precisely long enough for the rebel advance to commit past the point of clean extraction. Death Troopers were a different mathematics. Standard stormtroopers were trained, equipped, and deployed at a scale that prioritized volume over precision. Death Troopers were the opposite. Smaller numbers, higher individual capability, encrypted communications that denied the rebels the ability to intercept coordination, armor that absorbed damage that should have stopped them. The garrison troops falling back had not been retreating. They had been hurting. The rebel advance hit the Death Trooper defensive line and bled. The corridor was 40 meters long, and the Death Troopers owned the far end of it, and the near end had no cover worth the name. The rebel commandos went to the floor and the walls and returned fire with the discipline of soldiers who have been in bad positions before. But the position was bad in the specific way of positions designed by people who understood exactly how rebel commandos fought. Leia was at the junction, the T intersection 20 meters back from the corridor's opening, when the blast door to her left triggered. Not from enemy action. From a failing power coupling that the Death Troopers had pre-rigged, a secondary disruption designed to fragment the rebel formation at the moment of first contact. The door came down between her and the main element with a sound like a building decision. She had 2 soldiers with her, Private Ensho and Corporal Davine, both of whom she knew by name because she made it her practice to know names. Both of whom had the correct response. Pull back to the T-junction, establish a secondary position, wait for the main element to breach from the other side. Both of them went down at the same moment, from the same threat she hadn't seen coming from the right branch of the T. A second element, flanking, 3 Death Troopers moving with the economical precision of people executing a plan that had accounted for her specifically. Ensho and Davine went down and did not get up. Leia fell back around the corner. The left branch, a service corridor, narrow, ending in a sealed maintenance hatch 40 meters ahead. One direction. One option. She ran the math and the time it took to move. No comm. The encrypted Death Trooper communications were running active jamming on rebel frequencies. No backup that could reach her position before the 3 Death Troopers behind her rounded the corner. The maintenance hatch was sealed, and she had no access code. She pressed her back against the wall and raised her blaster and waited. The Death Trooper commandant came around the corner first. Black armor, no markings, a weapon already raised with the practiced positioning of someone who has done this in hallways before. He saw her. He stopped. He had her. The gap between that moment and the moment she would have fired was not long enough. She could see it, the specific geometry of too late, the angle of his weapon relative to her position, the distance. She had run this calculation before in other corridors and other situations, and she had never been wrong about it. She thought about Luke. Not deliberately, the grief did not ask for permission. It came in the way grief came when the body was in extremity, and the mind's filtering mechanisms were otherwise occupied. Luke on the Death Star, going to face this same machine alone because he believed it contained something worth reaching for. Luke on a pyre, the place in her chest that was missing. The righteous fury and the grief arrived simultaneously and had the same address, and she raised her hand. She did not decide to. That was the thing she would return to later. In the dark. In the particular insomnia of someone replaying a moment trying to find the point at which she could have done something different. She did not decide. Her hand came up and the commandant's throat closed, and she felt it. Felt his throat in her fist, though her fist was empty. Felt the specific resistance of it, the physiological panic of a man whose air has been cut by something he cannot see or touch or fight. She squeezed. It felt like justice. That was what the dark side did. She would understand this later, would have it explained to her in language that clarified what had seemed self-evident in the moment. It felt exactly like the most righteous thing in the world. It felt like Alderaan getting paid back. It felt like Luke not dying for nothing. It felt like finally having a weapon equal to the size of what had been done to her. The commandant's legs were going. She squeezed harder. She was going to kill him. She understood this with the same clarity with which she understood military logistics and political frameworks. The clear-eyed analytical quality that was the most distinctly Leia thing about her applied now to the fact that she was going to kill this man with her bare and empty hand. And she was not going to stop. And the reason she was not going to stop was that stopping would require her to return to the world where Luke was dead and Alderaan was ash, and the grief did not have anywhere to go. Leia. The voice came from behind the commandant. Not loud, not commanding. The specific register of someone who has earned the right to say a name like that through a route that cost more than any other payment schedule available. Stop. He had taken a blaster bolt on the approach. Left shoulder plate, a round that caught him at the joint where the plating met the chest unit. Not a clean hit, but not a graze. The kind of round that knocked the breath out of a man who didn't have breath to spare. He had compensated and kept moving because stopping was not a variable in the available calculus. He rounded the corridor junction with the bolt's exit burn still hot on the plating, and put himself between Leia and the commandant in one continuous motion. He took the commandant down with a single force push. Firm, precisely calibrated, enough to put the man into the wall at a velocity that would produce unconsciousness, and a decision to reconsider his career, not a velocity that would produce a funeral. The commandant crumpled and went still. Anakin turned to Leia. She was still standing with her hand extended. Still breathing at the rate of someone whose body had been preparing to do something and had not yet received the signal that the thing was done. Her eyes were wide, with the specific quality of someone who has just seen themselves do something they did not know they contained. She was looking at her own hand. He moved to her slowly. Not threatening, there was no version of moving toward Leia Organa in this state that worked if it could be interpreted as threatening. He crossed the distance between them and he put one hand over hers, over the outstretched hand, still aimed at where the commandant had been, and he pushed it down. Gently, the way you close something that has been open too long in a storm. He stood very close. Close enough that she could hear the breath mask's steady rhythm, close enough that the burn scarring on his face was visible in the corridor's emergency lighting. He looked at her directly. "I know what that feels like," he said quietly. "I know exactly what that feels like." She looked at him. Her hand was at her side now, his mechanical one still loosely around her wrist. Not restraining. Present, it felt right, she said. The words came out with the quality of a confession that disgusts the confessor. It felt like the correct thing. "Yes," he said. "It always does." She looked at the unconscious commandant on the floor, at her own hand, back at him, at the face, the damaged and visible face, the blue eyes that had looked at her across a vault 3 days ago and absorbed everything she gave them, without flinching. "That's what it was," she said. Not a question. "When you..." "Yes," he said. Every time. The corridor hummed with the distant sound of the main element breaching the blast door at the corridor's far end. 30 seconds, and they would have company. He released her wrist. He did not step back. "The difference," he said, "between what you just felt and what I did for 23 years is one thing." She waited. "You stopped," he said. She looked at him for a long moment in the emergency lighting of a service corridor under a half-built star destroyer on a planet that smelled like burning metal. The grief was still there. It did not go anywhere. The dark side's promise that it would transform grief into something useful was a lie. He could have told her that. He was telling her that. The grief was still there. But she was standing in it rather than drowning in it, and there was a difference between those two states, even if the difference was small. The main element came through. She straightened. She became, in the time it took to draw a breath, General Organa again, not because the other thing was gone, but because she had learned, across a lifetime of being both, how to hold them simultaneously, without either destroying the other. She turned to the team lead. "Seal this junction," she said. "Then get me to the node." She did not look back at Anakin. She didn't need to. He was there, and she knew he was there, and for now that was enough, and more than she had expected, and more than she could examine yet. She moved. The mission wasn't finished. Months. That is what it has taken to arrive here. Months of Cinder interdictions and fleet skirmishes, and the slow strangulation of an Imperial command structure being dismantled from the inside by the man who built it. The remnant has contracted steadily, world by world, star destroyer by star destroyer, until what is left of it has drawn to a single point above a desert world at the edge of the outer rim. 15 hours. That is the gap between now and the fleet engagement, between the assembled armada sitting in Home One's hangar records as a collection of registry numbers, and the moment those numbers become something moving toward Jaku. 15 hours in which there is nothing left to prepare. The intelligence has been delivered. The tactical plan has been reviewed and reviewed again. The boarding teams have their loadouts and the fleet commanders have their orders, and Anakin Skywalker has done everything that can be done with the hours that preceded these ones. He sits cross-legged on the bunk in the modified quarters they gave him after Kuwat. An upgrade from the vault, not a gesture of warmth, a gesture of utility. A man who is useful enough to require needs providing for. The distinction does not bother him. He has spent 2 decades making distinctions like this, between things that are gestures and things that are transactions, and he has learned that transactions can still contain worth. He has not slept. The suit makes sleep difficult. The chest panel runs a low diagnostic cycle every 4 hours that produces a vibration calibrated to wake the user before any system failure can become critical, and the part of Anakin's brain that has been managing the suit for 23 years is not capable of ignoring that cycle even when the rest of him wants to. He meditates instead. He cannot remember the last time he sat this way. Cross-legged, back straight, hands open on his knees, palms up, the mechanical ones and the suited ones. The position of a student who has been told that stillness is not absence of action, but its highest form, and who spent his entire training years only half believing it. He believes it now. That is what 23 years is good for, converting partial belief into the kind that has been tested past the point where it could be anything other than true. The meditation produces something he was not expecting. Quiet. Not the quiet of an empty room. He has the suit for that. The constant presence of the respiratory system. The low-frequency hum of Home One's engines through the deck plating. This is a different quiet. Interior, the dark side, which has been the background frequency of his existence since Mustafar. Not always loud, not always active, but always present, always there at the edge of any stillness, offering, is simply not there. It is absent. The way a noise you have lived with for so long it has become part of the architecture of your life is absent when it stops, and the absence is almost disorienting, because you did not realize how much of your sense of normal it had become. He sits in the absence and breathes and does not try to fill it. The light changes. Not the light from the bunk's fixture, that is unchanged. The flat artificial light of a warship's interior doing the same work it has always done. This is different. A quality of illumination that does not come from any source he can identify, which is not the same as saying it has no source. He has felt the Force long enough and in enough configurations to understand that some things it does do not have adequate physical descriptions. This is one of them. He opens his eyes. Luke is standing at the far end of the bunk. Same black tunic. The eyes the same, that particular blue-gray. the Skywalker inheritance. His mother's coloring re-expressed through a face he only got 1 year to know. He is smiling. Not the urgent, focused quality of the throne room, not the last terrible effort of a young man trying to hold something together. Easy, rested, the smile of someone who has put something down that was heavy and discovered their hands still work. Anakin looks at him for a long time. "You're real," he says. Not a question. A statement that is also an anchor, something to hold while the rest of him adjusts. "As real as anything is," Luke says. The voice is his. Exactly his, that direct farm boy delivery. The specific quality of someone who was always slightly more stubborn than the situation warranted, and was right to be. Anakin has heard this voice for 1 year, and it sounds, impossibly, like something he has always known. "I don't deserve this," Anakin says. Luke considers this. Not performing consideration, actually considering it, which is the most Luke thing possible, the absolute refusal to offer comfort that hasn't been thought through first. "Probably not," he says. "I'm here anyway." They do not speak in the language of declarations. That is not who either of them is. Anakin has never been a man who said things directly when precision was available, and Luke is his son. Whatever else has been complicated about that fact, and Luke has the same allergy to performance. They speak in specific things. In the concrete. In the language of what actually happened, rather than what it meant. Luke talks about the throne room. Not the emotional account, the observational one. He describes looking up from the floor through Palpatine's lightning at his father's face, the moment where the mask was cracked enough that the man behind it was visible even in profile. He describes what he saw, which was not certainty. He was a young man in agony on a floor, and certainty was not available to him in that condition. But something that was stronger than certainty in the way that things you feel in your body are stronger than things you know in your mind. He saw his father making a decision. He saw the decision in the movement, in the crossing of the distance, in the 4 steps that contained everything the training and the meditation and the patience across years had been building toward. "I saw you choose," Luke says. That's all it was. One choice. The respirator. The quiet. "It always feels like it should be more than one choice," Anakin says. "It's never more than one choice," Luke says. "The rest is just the time between choices, and what you do in it." He pauses. Then, there isn't much time left. Anakin hears what this means. He does not ask for clarification. He has been managing the suit long enough to know the difference between the system's reported status and its actual trajectory, and the lightning damage from Palpatine's attack is not the kind of damage that trends toward recovery. He has enough time to finish what he is here to finish. He has known this since Endor and has not spent the knowing on grief, because grief for his own ending is a luxury that belongs after the work is done. "Tell me about Leia," Luke says. Anakin looks at him. "I know what you see," Luke says. "Tell me." He is quiet for a moment. Then he speaks. Not in the economical language he has used across all the briefings and councils and intelligence sessions. In the other language, the one he has not used since Padam, since there was someone who merited it. He says, she is the most precise human being he has ever encountered, which is a quality that should be cold and in her is somehow the opposite, because the precision is in service of something, rather than just in service of itself. He says, watching her walk into a room is watching Padam walk into a room, the same quality of presence, the same immediate gravitational effect on the people around her, and the first time it happened in a briefing he had to stop and breathe carefully for a moment. He says, she is wounded in a way that has the shape of his hand on it, and he does not look away from that. He cannot afford to look away from it, because looking away would be the most Vader thing he could do, and he is trying to be finished with that. He says, he does not know if she will forgive him. He has stopped organizing his actions around whether she will. He is only thinking about what she deserves, which is everything he has left and more. Luke listens with the quality of someone who already knows everything being said and is listening anyway, because the saying of it matters. Show her, Luke says. That's what I said. Not make her forgive you. Show her. What does that look like? Luke's expression shifts. Something in it is amused in the specific way of someone who knows the person they're talking to already has the answer and is asking out of genuine uncertainty rather than performance. "You'll know," he says. "You always knew how to do the dramatic gesture." The silence holds for a beat. Then, from somewhere Anakin did not know was still functional, some mechanism that had been in disrepair for 23 years, unused so long it had seemed structural rather than broken. Something comes loose, and he laughs. Small, rusty, as if the hinges have not been tested in a very long time. But real. Present. Luke is smiling. "Did you know?" Anakin asks. The laughter has gone. He is looking at his son with the kind of directness that only exists between people who have run out of reasons for indirection. Before, "Did you know what it would cost?" Luke does not look away. He does not soften the answer into something comfortable. "I hoped for better," he says. "I believed in you more than I believed in the plan." He pauses. The illumination around him is doing something, not fading yet, but changed, the way light changes in the last minutes before something ends. It turns out that was enough. Anakin holds this, turns it over, sets it next to all the other things he has been carrying and finds that it does not add weight. It does the opposite. "Was it worth it?" he asks. He means, does the galaxy that exists now justify the cost of the life that made it possible? Is there an accounting that makes Luke Skywalker's death something other than the largest unpayable debt in the known universe? Luke looks at him for a moment. "Ask Leia," he says. "She's the one still here to judge it." The ghost begins to go. Anakin watches it happen without trying to stop it. He is a man who has finally learned the difference between holding and grasping. And he does not grasp. He reaches out. Not to grab. Just toward. The movement of a man who wants to bridge a distance that cannot be bridged, and knows it, and reaches anyway. Because the reaching is the true thing regardless of whether it arrives. Luke's expression in the last moment contains no pity. Warmth. Something that is specifically pride. Not the pride of a teacher who was right, but the pride of a son who has seen something in his father that his father cannot fully see in himself. "The galaxy needs Anakin Skywalker to make things right," Luke says. "Not Vader. You. He's gone. The bunk is just a bunk. The light is just the flat artificial light of a warship's interior. The quiet that remains is the quiet of an empty room, which is different from the quiet of the meditation. And Anakin sits in it and lets it be what it is. After a long time he stands. He begins the suit check. Chest panel, respiratory system, backup regulators, the shoulder plate repair from Kuwat that is holding, but not well. He goes through each item in sequence, methodical, the way a pilot checks an X-wing before a sortie, the way you treat a tool you are going to need to work. He loads the lightsaber. White blade. No affiliation. He has not felt like Anakin Skywalker in a very long time. Tonight, impossibly he does. They come out of hyperspace in sequence. Not all at once. Admiral Akbar has planned the emergence in staggered waves, each element timed to the second, so that the remnant's defensive sensors register not one massive signature, but a rolling series of arrivals that saturate their targeting systems before the targeting systems can prioritize. Mon Cal cruisers first, largest and most capable of absorbing the opening fire. Then the corvettes. Then the fighter complement already launching before the ships have fully oriented. The patchwork armada of a revolution. Ships acquired, salvaged, stolen, modified, held together by maintenance schedules that were ambitious and crews that were something beyond that, emerging into Jaku's orbital plane in the gray light of a desert planet star. Akbar watches from Home One's command bridge and reads the tactical picture the way he reads everything, with the cold precision of a mind that has spent its life converting chaos into accessible variables. The remnant is here. Star destroyers in defensive formation, anchored around the Ravager, Superstar Destroyer, Command Nexus. The Imperial flag sitting at the center of the formation like a declaration that this is where it ends. It is enormous and brutal and nothing like Kuwat, or the Implacable, or any of the surgical engagements of the preceding months. Those were procedures. This is two armies deciding, simultaneously, that they have run out of options that don't involve spending themselves against each other until one side is gone. Ships die in the first 3 minutes. Not small ships. A Mon Cal cruiser takes a turbolaser volley at close range that opens 3 decks to vacuum, the crew in those decks gone before the emergency seals close. Akbar hears the ship's registry designation come off the active list and absorbs it and continues. He has Anakin's intelligence. He knows where the Remnant's formation is weakest, which captains will break under pressure and which will not, where the fire concentrations are and where the gaps are, and how to thread the fleet through those gaps with minimum cost. Minimum cost is not no cost. He knows this. He keeps moving. Below on Jaku's surface, Leia is directing ground forces against the garrison. She is operating from a forward position that she was told was too far forward, and that she moved to anyway, because the view from the position was necessary, and the argument for the view was stronger than the argument against the risk. The comms chatter is constant, the sound of a battle happening everywhere simultaneously, which is what battles actually sound like from inside them, a noise that never resolves into clarity, but that she has learned, across years, to read. She hears the Ravager comm go to static, and she knows the infiltration has begun. The maintenance bay of the Ravager was 40 meters of industrial gray, and the specific cold of a ship section that prioritizes function over climate control. Anakin came off the shuttle ramp into it with the 6 rebel commandos tight behind him, moving before the magnetic clamps had fully released, because the shuttle's docking had not been clean. The if codes held for the approach and broke in the final 30 seconds, and the bay's automated defenses had activated 2 seconds before docking completed, and those 2 seconds had cost them the element of surprise, but not the entrance. The guards at the bay's far end were 4. They saw the shuttle, saw the boarding ramp, saw the gray-plated figure come off it with a white blade ignited, and 2 of them made the calculation immediately, and went to the floor with their hands visible. The other 2 did not. He deflected the first volley with economy, 2 redirects, both bolts returning at angles that disabled rather than killed, because he had made a promise, and the promise was about what kind of man he was choosing to be in the time he had left. He crossed the distance to the standing soldiers in 3 steps. The lightsaber took their weapons out of their hands at the emitter, not the hands. They stared at him. He looked at them. "Sit down," he said. They sat down. The commandos secured the bay. He was already moving toward the interior, wave by wave. That was the shape of it. The alarm went through the Ravager fast. A ship this size had redundant alert systems, and every one of them knew within 60 seconds that something had breached the maintenance bay. The corridor squads responded in the way soldiers respond to an alert when they don't yet know what the alert is about. Fast, organized, prepared for a threat whose parameters they will assess on contact. They assessed on contact. The word spread again through the ship's internal comms the way it had spread through the Implacable, but the Ravager was not a Victory class doing a routine Cinder deployment. The Ravager was the command ship of a dying empire, crewed by the people who had chosen, of all the options available after Endor, to come here and make a stand. These were not soldiers who broke easily. Some of them broke anyway, not from cowardice, from the specific cognitive fracture of confronting a fact that does not fit inside the belief system that has organized your life. The figure in gray moving through the Ravager's corridors was using the Force with a precision that made the dark side look like a blunt instrument, because that is what it was. The dark side was always a blunt instrument dressed as a scalpel, and what they were watching now was the actual thing. The Force in the hands of someone who had finally stopped fighting it. He moved through corridors like water moving through gaps, never where the fire was, always where it wasn't. The white blade a constant that deflected and redirected and did not once seek out a killing stroke. Turbolaser crews came down from their stations. He went through them like a verb that has only one conjugation. 3 of them surrendered before he reached them, and he let them go, pointing back toward the maintenance bay, toward the commandos who were processing detainees with the focused efficiency of people who had not expected to have this many to process. The Ravager was bleeding personnel toward the exits, not routing, evacuating, which was a different thing, and Anakin noted the difference with something that was not satisfaction, but was adjacent to relief. The command deck. Grand Admiral Ray Sloan stood at the tactical display with the bearing of someone who has not yet decided whether this moment is the one that defeats her. She was not what Anakin had expected. He had built a file on her over months of intelligence briefings, knew her service record, knew her strategic philosophy, knew the particular quality of methodical ambition that had kept her functional in the post-Endor chaos when every other senior officer was either fleeing or fracturing. She was not fleeing or fracturing. She was standing at her tactical display watching the battle above her go wrong in the way battles go wrong when the intelligence advantage belongs to someone else. She saw him come through the command deck doors and she did not reach for her weapon. Not immediately. "It's over, Admiral," he said. "The Emperor is dead. You are fighting for a ghost." She looked at him. The gray plating. The white blade, currently powered down, at his belt. The face? She had never seen the face before. No one outside a very small circle had seen the face, and it was not what the mythology prepared you for. It was a man's face. Damaged, tired, and completely certain about what he was doing here. "You, of all people," she said, "should understand what it means to serve a cause larger than yourself." "I understand exactly what it cost," he said. "That's why I'm here." She fired. The sidearm was up in the practiced motion of someone who has maintained the reflex across decades of situations where the reflex was necessary. He had the blade ignited before the shot completed its travel. The white light caught the bolt and redirected it into the deck plating, harmless. And in the same motion he stepped inside her firing line and took the weapon from her hand with the lightsaber's edge. Clean, the blade removed the weapon, not the hand, because that was the choice he had made about what kind of man he was. She stood without a weapon and looked at him. "Stand down," he said. "Let your people go." She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the tactical display, at the formation collapsing above her, at the fleet engagement going the direction fleet engagements go when the command and intelligence advantage belongs entirely to the other side. She looked at him. He left her alive. That was a choice too. He was making a lot of choices today about what kind of man he was, and that was one of them. The engineering section of the Ravager was the size of a small city block and smelled like coolant and the particular ozone of systems running at capacity for extended periods. He reached it with the commandos 8 minutes behind him and the suit's diagnostics beginning to report things he was not going to stop to address. He keyed the self-destruct. Not for the ship alone. The Ravager was the command and coordination node for every remaining Cinder operation in the network, the backbone that kept the distributed deployments synchronized and responsive. Destroy the backbone and the remaining operations collapsed simultaneously, severed from the timing and targeting data they needed to function. He had built the architecture of this network. He knew exactly where to cut it. He keyed the ship wide on all frequencies, Alliance and Imperial. Both, because this message was for everyone. This is Anakin Skywalker. His voice through the breath mask, through the Ravager's speaker system, through every frequency carrying the battle above Jaku. The Ravager will be destroyed in 15 minutes. All personnel, abandon ship. Alliance forces, cease offensive operations and allow evacuation. This war is over. He set the countdown. The display confirmed, 15 minutes. He held the engineering section. The Imperial loyalists who came to abort the sequence came in 3 groups. The first while the evacuation alarms were still registering as new information, the second while the evacuation was underway, the third when the evacuation was nearly complete, and the countdown had 8 minutes remaining. He went through all 3 groups the same way he had gone through every group on the Ravager, with economy, with precision, with the specific and absolute presence of someone who has decided what he is willing to do and what he isn't, and is no longer expending any energy on the question. The last commando reported clear with 4 minutes on the sequence. He turned toward the hangar. He didn't run. The suit wouldn't allow it. The warning indicators across the chest panel were amber going red, oxygen saturation dropping below operational threshold, the shoulder repair from Kuwat finally giving out entirely under the sustained combat stress of the last 40 minutes. He walked with intent, using the Force as a sense rather than a weapon, reading the Ravager's collapsing sections ahead of him like a map, finding the path through what was still passable. A maintenance shuttle. Bay 17, Port side, 40 meters from the engineering section's secondary exit. He found it with 90 seconds on the sequence. He got it off the deck with 80. The Ravager detonated behind him at a distance that moved the shuttle like a hand swatting something small. The shockwave took the craft and he corrected through it manually, both hands on the controls, the force keeping the shuttle's attitude stable through the debris field that had been, 12 seconds ago, the largest remaining Imperial command structure in the known galaxy. Silence on the Imperial frequencies. Then, beginning at the edges of the formation and moving inward, the sound of surrender. Ship by ship. The battle above Jaku going quiet, in the specific way that battles go quiet when the thing that was holding them together is gone, and the people still fighting look at each other, and discover they have run out of reasons. He slumped in the pilot's seat. The chest panel was amber. He looked at it for a moment, then looked at the viewport. The debris field where the Ravager was, and beyond it, past the thinning battle smoke, past the last exchange of fire going silent as the surrender spread, the first stars coming clear, bright points against dark space, no HUD overlay, no mission parameters, no dark side offering anything at the edge of it, just stars. He breathed. The chest panel counted the breath. He had enough left. Enough for one more thing. The overhead lights pass in sequence. That is what he is aware of most clearly. Not the pain, which is present but distant in the way of things the body has been managing for so long it has automated the management. Not the sound of the two 1B units' wheels on the medbay floor. Not the voices of the rebel medics speaking to each other across him in the shorthand of people doing urgent work. The overhead lights. Each one a white rectangle sliding past as the gurney moves, and between each one a brief dark, and then the next light. And he counts them without meaning to, because counting is what his mind does when it has been released from the requirement to plan. 11 lights between the hangar and the medbay. A medic leans into his field of vision. Young, the specific focused calm of someone who has been trained to perform under conditions that would undo most people, and who has not yet had enough experience to know what it costs over time. She says something about his systems. He hears it and processes it, and sets it next to the other things he already knows about his systems. The battle, he says. Over, she says. She doesn't elaborate. He sees in her face that she is telling the truth and not softening it. Over means over. He had asked for over and over is what happened. Good, he says. He doesn't say anything else. Mon Mothma is in the medbay when they bring him in. He registers this as they move him from the gurney to the medical bed. She is standing against the far wall, out of the way, with the quality of someone who came here for a reason and has decided the reason can wait for the room to stop being occupied by urgency. She looks at him. He looks at her. He nods. Not gratitude, settlement, the nod of a man closing an account. She had said prove what Luke believed, and he had gone out and proven it at a cost the accounting of which she is already doing. Behind the stillness of her face, in the way she will spend the rest of her political life accounting for it. What it means that they used him. What it means that it worked. What the new government built on this foundation owes to that fact, and how it repays it. She steps back. She gives the room to what comes next. That is, he thinks, what good leadership looks like in the moments it matters most, knowing what is yours and what belongs to someone else, and stepping back from the latter without being asked. He waits. She is still in her field armor when she comes through the door. Jaku dust on her boots, and carbon scoring on her jacket's left shoulder, a graze, not a hit, but close enough to leave a mark. Her hair is down from the braid she wore into the ground engagement, half loose, the way it gets when a battle has lasted long enough that the things holding it together have given out. She stands in the doorway for a moment, not hesitating, assessing, the way Leia Organa enters every room, every situation. Reading it first, committing second. Han is not with her. Anakin understands this without needing it explained. Han Solo knows what belongs to him and what doesn't. And this, whatever this is, the thing that is about to happen in this room, does not belong to him. He will be in a corridor somewhere, doing the thing Han does when he is feeling something he hasn't found words for yet, occupying his hands with something mechanical and waiting. She crosses to the bedside and sits. The chair is standard medical bay issue, the kind of chair designed for someone to occupy briefly during a routine check. Not for the kind of sitting that is about being present for a long time. She sits in it like it is exactly the right chair for exactly this moment, because Leia Organa can make any chair the right chair through the quality of her attention. The respirator is quieter now, running on a lower setting, not because the system has been adjusted, but because the system is doing what systems do when the thing they are supporting has less and less to support. The chest panel amber, holding, the blue eyes watching her. "Did they tell you?" he asks. "Yes," she says. He nods. He had not expected this to surprise him, and it does not. The medics in the corridor before she entered. He knows how these conversations go. He has been on the other side of them. "I want to tell you about your mother," he says. While there's time, he tells her everything. Not the tragedy, or not only the tragedy. He starts before the tragedy, because that is where Padmé Amidala actually begins, and Leia deserves the beginning. He tells her, a senator from Naboo, elected to the Galactic Senate at the age when most people are deciding which direction to point their lives. He tells her the stubbornness first, because it is the most Leia thing about her mother and he wants Leia to hear it early. The woman who had walked into rooms full of people with decades more experience and made them feel, through no mechanism he was ever able to fully identify, that the argument was not yet settled, and she was going to be the one to settle it. He tells her, she believed the Republic could be saved through words rather than weapons. He says so the way a man says a true thing about someone they loved, not with the distance of retrospect, but with the closeness of someone who is still standing next to it. She was wrong about the Republic, he says. The Republic could not be saved. But she was not wrong about the words. The words she spent her life using seeded something. And what they seeded grew in the dark, and came up through the catastrophe of everything that followed. And Leia Organa is part of what it grew into. He tells her this directly. He wants her to have it clearly, without ornament. He tells her about the first time he saw her, not the Naboo mission, before that, when he was 9 years old and she arrived in the Jedi Temple, and every force sensitive within range registered the quality of her as a disturbance, in the sense that a very clear bell note is a disturbance, something that reorganizes the air around it. He tells her about Coruscant and the Senate, and the specific animated fury she brought to political work she believed in, which was all political work, because she did not do things she did not believe in. He cannot remember a single instance of Padmé Amidala going through emotion. His voice drops when he reaches the end of it. He does not finish the sentence about her death. There is a grammar for the things that cannot be said, the subject, the predicate, and then the place where the object should be, left open. Because the object is what broke him and became the lever Palpatine used, and became 23 years of Darth Vader, and became all of this, and Leia is not inside this room to receive the weight of all of that. She is inside this room to receive her mother. He leaves the sentence open. She understands without being told. He can see it in the stillness of her face, the way she absorbs the shape of the unsaid thing and places it next to the things she already knows about loss, and holds it there without flinching. She would have loved you, he says. She would have argued with you constantly. She would have been so proud. Leia is not crying. She is very still, in the way of someone receiving something they have needed for a very long time and did not know how to shape until it arrived. She says, "Tell me more." He does. He tells her about the lake house on Naboo, the water, the light on the water, the sound of the falls in the morning. He tells her what Padmé laughed at and what she didn't, and the specific quality of her silence when she was thinking, versus when she had decided. He tells her small things, that she kept a journal and a cipher no one else knew, that she was a precise and terrible cook who never admitted it, that she had a way of looking at you when she was genuinely listening that made you feel like the only person in the room, which was a diplomatic skill she'd been trained in, and which was also simply true of her, which was the rarest combination. He talks until the talking becomes difficult, not from grief, from the suit, from the chest panel that is doing what the medics told Leia it would do at this stage, the slow decrement of a system reaching the limit of what it can maintain. He is aware of it, without alarm. He has been aware of it since Endor, since the moment on the shuttle when he looked at the chest panel and ran the mathematics and understood the trajectory. He has had what he needed. He has had more than he deserved, and he knows this, and he is not going to argue with the accounting. At some point in the quiet that follows the telling, Leia reaches over and takes his mechanical hand, not as a declaration, not as the closing of a formal distance. The way you take someone's hand when they are leaving and you are staying, and there is no language adequate to the border between those two states, and your hand knows this even when your vocabulary doesn't. He looks down at her hand on his. He turns his hand over, the mechanical fingers closing around hers, gently, with the care of someone who has broken things and has learned, late, what careful actually requires. Leia, she looks up. I know what I don't deserve, he says. She doesn't answer this. She doesn't argue it and she doesn't absolve it. She holds it the way she holds everything, with the full weight of her attention, without looking away. Call me Father, he says, the respirator, the quiet of the med bay, the amber light of the chest panel running low and steady. She says it. Once, quietly, the word carrying the full weight of everything it has cost both of them to arrive at this single syllable. Father, he exhales. The sound of it is different from all the previous exhales, something released that has been held for so long the holding had become invisible. The chest panel registers the change. He does not look at it. He's here, he says. She goes still. He's been here a while. His voice is very quiet now, at peace in the specific way of someone who has put something down. Since I came in. She looks at the corner of the room. She cannot see anything, no light, no presence she can name with any sense she knows how to use. But she believes him. She has learned, across these months, that there is a register of truth that doesn't require her to see the thing to know it is true. She looks at the corner and says, very quietly, "Thank you." She doesn't know exactly what she's thanking him for. She means everything. She means for being stubborn enough to make their father choose. She means for being right about him when she wasn't. She means for the year, the 1 year, which was not enough, and was also exactly enough. He does not go like a machine shutting down. The chest panel dims, not abruptly, in the gradual way of something that has been running a long time and is simply finishing. The respirator quiets. The mechanical hand goes slack in hers, and she does not release it. She stays with her hand in his for a long time, in the quiet of the med bay, while the amber light on the chest panel goes from amber to nothing. What leaves is not only Darth Vader. The darkness that was Darth Vader, the compressed grief and the leveraged rage and the 23 years of a man choosing, again and again, the thing that cost him more than he had. That goes. But with it goes the thing that was trying to come back through it. The light that had been working its way out since Endor. And what enters the Force in their place is something that is neither of those two things separately. Something that contains both, and has burned through to what was underneath. A pilot who loved to go fast. A boy from a desert world who looked at the stars and believed there was something better beyond them, and was right about that even when he was wrong about everything else. A man who was told by his son that there was still good in him, and who spent his last months making the telling true. He joins the Force the way Luke told him he would. Luke was right about him. He proved it. Some time passes. Not days, weeks. The galaxy is different in the way that things are different when the structure that organized them is gone, and what replaces it is messier and more hopeful and harder in all the ways that real peace is always harder than the war that preceded it. Mon Mothma's first peace talks with the surrendered Imperial commanders. Rey Sloane, alive because Anakin made a choice on the Ravager's command deck. At the table, not as a victor and not as a prisoner, but as something the galaxy doesn't have a word for yet. A person on the wrong side of history, trying to find out if there is a right side she is still capable of reaching. The negotiations are difficult and necessary and ongoing. Leia is in a small room. Her quarters, on whatever base they are using now, the location less important than the quality of the room, which is the quality of a space a person has made briefly her own in the way of someone who has never stayed anywhere long enough to fully unpack. On the table in front of her, 2 lightsabers. Luke's, Recovered from the Death Star's debris field by a salvage team operating on her standing order, the one she issued 2 days after Endor without explaining why, and without needing to. Brought to her in a sealed case by a tech who handed it over in silence and left quickly, which was the correct response. And Anakin's. The white-hilted saber, the crystal inside it no color affiliated with any side of any war. Han had come to her 3 days after the medbay with it in his jacket pocket, and set it on the table in front of her, and said nothing. That was it. That was the scene. She had looked at him, and he had looked at her, and she had understood, without either of them producing a word for it, that this was how Anakin Skywalker said what he wanted to say about what he was leaving behind. Han, without comment, had made it happen. She picks up the white-hilted saber. She holds it, the weight of it, the specific balance of a weapon made by a man who had been building lightsabers since he was a child, and who put into this one something different from what he had put into all the others. She feels the kyber crystal's resonance through the casing, not the Force, exactly, or not only the Force. The intention in the crystal, the grief that went into it and came out the other side as something clean. She ignites it. White, a blade the color of no affiliation, no side, no war, the color of something that has burned through everything it was given, and come out the other side as just itself. She holds the light in her hands for a long time. She had never asked to be a Jedi. She had only asked, once, to know who her brother was. In the white light, she found her answer. She was him. She was all of them. She was what came next. The story does not tell us what she does after that. It doesn't need to. She is already moving. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.